Hello. Welcome to the fall of the nation state and the rise of something else. City state, ethno state, eco state. Sure, we're heartened by the Biden Harris administration now, but the threats from efforts to undermine government predatory interests and social upheavals aren't going anywhere. So, what's next? And what do we as citizens do? Someone asked me, when should we start resisting the next attempt to stage a coup in the US? I said now. The future of democracy and justice and equity is on the ballot in every office that is up for election, from school board to council to representative to president. It is up to we citizens to build the best way to protect and improve them. Here we are. Now we've seen the rescue from the judiciary, congressional district map, redistricting, suits to reverse the election on unfounded accusations, and things like that. State and local officials stepping up to manage the coronavirus pandemic when Twitler was off doing his thing. State and local governments had to step in too to contain the incendiary backlash from monstrous elements in American society, acting at the behest of monstrous elements in the federal government when those well informed, sober state and local officials acted in their constituents' interest. Today, we have several people who have well informed and practiced insight about how the candidates we will consider for positions in government and the judiciary are agents of justice in Pittsburgh, the Commonwealth, and the nation. During the panel discussion, we'll have questions and answers. After the panel discussion, we'll have Q&A. You can submit your questions by chat, and then a few announcements for the coming year. As you know, the club is dedicated to informed and progressive citizenship. We're learning more than ever about how economics, politics, sexuality, and gender, race, and climate are intertwined in every election, every voter registration, and every vote, every call to voters, and every message to our elected officials, and every protest. Thanks to everyone for your interest in coming today and everything you do. Thanks to everyone for joining the club and helping to make us so effective. You know, an endorsement from us results in about better than 5% more votes in the primary, don't you? It's true. We've had that. During the panel discussion, we'll have Q&A. You can submit your questions by chat, and then we'll have a few announcements for the coming year. As you know, the club is dedicated to informed and progressive citizenship. We're learning more than ever about how economics, politics, sexuality and gender, race, and climate are intertwined in every election, every voter registration and every vote, every call to voters, every message to our elected officials, and every step in protest. Thanks to everyone for your interest in everything you do. Thanks to everyone for joining the club and helping to make us so effective. Side note, you know that an endorsement from us results in better than 5% more votes in the primary, don't you? We've had that done statistically. Our voters guide accompanies voters right into the voting booth throughout the 14th ward. You can see it everywhere. Now I'd like to thank everyone involved in this event. And if I have missed anyone's name, just know that you're fantastic and your help is always valued. Mary Hall is the first vice president and has organized this event. Tracy Baton, Ed Wren, Karen Hochberg, and the videographer John Craig have done work on some of the programming. Noah Walkington's our treasurer, keeps track of membership and every cent that we take in and put out. Julie Freeman is chair of the nominating committee, and thank you everyone for nominating someone or yourselves to run for board or an officer position. This is great. Liz Healy's our second VP and handles the endorsement election every year very ably. And lastly, Mac Booker, thank you, as secretary of the club and also coordinating online voting today. and to the whole board and the annual meeting program committee. I'm stepping down as president this year. I can't remember exactly how long I've been president actually, but look forward to continued involvement in bringing justice to the 14th Ward, the city, and the region. And we'd also like to recognize candidates and elected officials who were here. Bruce Beamer, candidate for Common Pleas. Zeke Rediker, candidate for Common Pleas. Summer Lee, state representative in the 34th District. Paul Klein, County Council, District 11. Amanda Green Hawkins, candidate for Commonwealth Court. Carolyn Nichols, candidate for Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Matt Rogers, candidate for Common Pleas. Chuck Porter, Common Pleas. Judge David Spurgeon. Judge Maria McLaughlin, running for Pennsylvania Superior Court. Kevin Kraus, who's running for Allegheny County Sheriff. And anyone I've missed, your name may come up, some people may show up, but thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to presenting our program. Bye.
The 14th Ward Independent Democratic Club is the oldest continuously operating Democratic club in the country.
Our members are registered Democratic Party members in Pittsburgh's 14th Ward.
Our members are registered Democratic Party members in Pittsburgh's 14th Ward, which includes Swiss Elm Park, Squirrel Hill, Regent Square, Point Breeze, Park Place, North Point Breeze, and Duck Hollow.
We believe in traditional Democratic Party ideals.
Many of the club's members are activists who have worked very hard on many issues, including racial justice, economic equity, the environment, and good government.
In the 14th Ward, we're proud that we vote at one of the highest rates in both the state of Pennsylvania and the nation.
The club was founded in 1964 by progressive independent Democrats in the 14th Ward in the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and has been in continuous operation since then.
The club's a membership organization of progressive Democrats who support liberal causes and progressive government.
Each spring, the club comes together to endorse Democratic candidates. We create a voter's guide that is distributed throughout Pittsburgh's 14th Ward.
The 14th Ward is the largest ward in the city of Pittsburgh and one of the largest political entities in Allegheny County and the state of Pennsylvania.
My name is Ed Wren, MD, and I invite you to become a member today.
My name is Ron Gatos, and I invite you to join and or donate to the Pittsburgh 14th Ward Independent Democratic Club.
My name is Tracy Baton, and I invite you to join and support our work.
Hi, I'm Karen Hochberg. Please join us. Become a member of the 14th Ward Independent Democratic Club. We need your voice to amplify our voice.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm David Harris from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and I thank you for the invitation to speak to you a little bit about defunding the police. I hope you will not mind if I share my screen with you. It'll make things real smooth. Okay, here we go. You should see that now. Okay, so defunding, abolishing, or reimagining the police. Just a few thoughts and considerations for you as you go forward. Please first note this copyright notice, do not share, period. This is only for you. So defunding the police. You see on the left, people demonstrating in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, making that demand. You see on the right, these are 9 members of the Minneapolis City Council just days after the murder of Mr. Floyd in a city park holding a meeting. 9 of them make up a veto-proof majority of their city council, and they are announcing, as you see it there, that they are going to vote to defund and abolish their police department to be replaced with, well, they're not sure, but the answers will come from the community. But they know they don't want their police department anymore given what's happened. It hasn't worked out, as you probably know, in exactly the way they envisioned. But let's ask ourselves what this idea of defunding or abolishing the police really means. Okay. I think the very first point to make, and I say this as a person who's been working on this issue and many others for years, who was a member, a member of Mayor Peduto's community task force on police reform over this past summer and fall, and has talked to many, many people who are all over this issue from all kinds of different points of view. It really depends on who you're asking. It means different things to different people, almost totally different things to everyone. There are some on one side of the spectrum who really want police abolished. They feel it is irretrievably broken, it can't be fixed, or like my wonderful colleague Paul Butler at Georgetown University Law School, no, it's not broken, it's working exactly the way it's supposed to. Policing is an instrument and a creature of white supremacy. It can't be fixed. Abolish it. But I really think that they are not the majority, and polling shows that. More often, even people who will count themselves as, quote, abolitionists are really saying, when you try to push them and pin them down a bit, they want policing transformed and probably made much smaller and transformed as to how it works. All right. Almost everybody is saying that there should be a change in priorities, and priorities, of course, mean budgetary expenditures. So it's really dependent on who is speaking. You will hear people saying, get rid of it, no more people in cages. Many more people have a different point of view. But I think it's important to understand whether you could imagine having no police at all. Now, look at me. I'm a white, middle-aged man. Given my likely experiences and my actual experiences, I can tell you throughout life, I haven't had that many bad experiences with police. I've had a few, but I've had many that have gone just fine. And therefore, I, or a person like me, can't imagine abolishing the police. It looks crazy. But what if I was Black? What if I was a person of color? And I have talked to many, many people who would fall in those groups as part of research, as part of working together, as part of just being friends. And I can tell you, their experiences with police are radically different than mine. And if mine were like theirs, I might be able to say, I don't want any more police. If when my car is stolen, I call the police, I'm probably going to get an officer out to take a report. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it'll take a while, but that's what they'll do. They'll take a report. They'll let me know, so on and so forth. If I'm Black, I might have had the experience of I call the police about my stolen car and I end up in handcuffs. Right? If I'm Black, when somebody's trying to break into my house and I call the police, my kids might end up on the floor with guns pointed at them when the police arrive. Right? That's not an experience that most white people have. And therefore, I think we should listen to and respect those who have had those experiences. Right? And I think that what that does is it tells us to take the idea of abolishing the police or defunding the police and to use it as a useful prod, a useful framework for making ourselves ask hard questions, correct questions about what the problems really are. And this is how I see those questions. You're just getting my point of view here across my experiences, research, and work. I look at it like this. Look at the bundle of services that we have police deliver. And it's a whole bunch of things because look, when you call the city, only the police come out. Maybe sometimes the water department, right? If there's a big leak or something, but you call 911, it's the police. The Department of Health doesn't come. The social workers don't come. We're not set up that way. So we have to look at the full bundle of services that police provide and what we might want other people or agencies to provide instead of the police. All right. So ask what tasks the police are doing now and ask what do we actually want police to respond to? What tasks do we actually need the people with the guns and the handcuffs to come for? And it's definitely less than the full bundle they're responding to now. And in some of those situations, things go bad. So we want them to respond to serious crime, but you've probably seen the same reports that I have. Responding to serious crime actually takes up a surprisingly small percentage of their time, because we are also having them respond to non-criminal incidents, barking dogs that are irritating the neighbors, the cat in the tree. But more seriously, things like a mental health crisis, things like homelessness, which manifest as minor criminal actions, sleeping someplace people aren't supposed to, stealing stuff out of the 7-Eleven in order to eat, drug addiction, people ending up overdosing in public places. Here's a secret. Police do not want to respond to those things either. They know that that's not what they're about. They know that that's not what they're trained for. And so we should be asking, who should do that? Right? What form should that take? For which of the full bundle of tasks do we actually need the police? And for which is something else appropriate? And there are things that would be more appropriate, right? In Eugene, Oregon, for 30 years, there's been a program called CAHOOTS. That's an actual acronym, CAHOOTS. And CAHOOTS sends out, when there's a mental health crisis, they send out a mental health worker, sometimes accompanied by a police officer to keep things safe, who stays in the background. But that person is actually trained for that. You could send a social worker to help the homeless people. You could send people trained in drugs and drug safety to drug addiction crises, right? It doesn't always have to be the police, and frankly, shouldn't be. That will minimize police encounters, and minimizing police encounters means that you will have fewer of them go bad, right? And that's critical. Then you want to create, in the bargain, you have to create the agencies and so forth that will respond to these different responsibilities, right? Because if you don't do that, if you just cut police budgets and you have nowhere and nobody for those problems, the police are still going to have to come. Somebody's going to have to come, all right? So yes, transfer resources, but with the responsibility. When you've created other agencies that can be responsible. The police have no interest in barking dogs and burglar alarms that just go off all the time. They want to fight real crime. I would caution you against easy answers, okay? This will be my final set of points here. We desperately need more funding and more investment to go into underserved communities, particularly our Black communities. We absolutely need that. And it should start today, and it should be happening now, regardless of what else you do to any other piece of the budget, or whether you have to increase taxes. Just do it, as that one company says, right? One set of answers, of course, is cut this percentage from the police budget and shift that into community needs and investment. Now, I get that. There's a certain logic to it, certainly. But that number one ties the sorely needed investment and funding for communities to cuts in the police budget, which you know are going to be politically difficult, if not worse. All right. And that makes it more difficult to get that crucial funding and money into communities. Just do it. Don't wait for this. And frankly, you may not want a one-to-one cut and transfer. Right. I hear this other answer, the third bullet point, based on the number of officers per X thousands of population, we have too many police officers. Look, this city of the same size has only X number of officers per 100,000 people, while we have X plus 10. That means we have too much. I think that's too simple, honestly. It ignores too many factors that make every city different. Suppose we could compare Pittsburgh at 300,000, plus or minus population, to another city with the same population. And we found out that the other city has 5 snowplows per 100,000 population, and Pittsburgh, let's say, has 100 or 200. All right. We would say that other city is way under snowplowed, or we're over snowplowed. Well, look, if that other city is somewhere in the southwestern United States, oh, not much snow, maybe. Right now, that's a very simplistic example, but I think it really shows you that that's an incomplete picture. That's all I would say. Ask instead, what do you want police to do, and how should they do it, and who else should be involved in what pieces of public safety? Public safety is a wide picture. Police aren't the answer to everything, and there's plenty of things they aren't the answer to at all. Find the right people and agencies and skills for those things. Move the police to whatever they're good at and trained for. And you probably end up needing fewer of them. But go at it that way instead of just cut, 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 move, move, move. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you.
Hi, I'm Jerry Dickinson, Associate Professor of Law at the University of Pittsburgh and former candidate for Congress here in the Pittsburgh area. I want to thank the 14th Ward Independent Democratic Club for inviting me to speak here at the annual meeting. I applaud the club for taking up cash bail as a rallying call at this meeting. As many of you know, the criminal justice system and prisons in particular essentially become warehouses for the poor, for those suffering with mental health issues and those suffering from addiction, substance abuse. And that is by design. And the cash bail system in many ways perpetuates these problems, and particularly its impact on the poor. And so instead of talking about the legality of cash bail or legislation that may or may not remedy the problem, I just want to talk about this from a very personal perspective. And I think it's important for us to understand and know that the cash bail system and the criminal justice system affects so many different people all throughout the United States, including me and my own family. And it's important to tell these stories as well. So when I was asked to speak on this issue, it gave me an opportunity to reflect back on my own family's experience with the cash bail system. It forced me to really go back into some of my siblings' criminal records and also receipts that I still had from actually paying bail bondsmen with regards to some of their arrests. I grew up in the Allegheny County foster care system, grew up in a foster home with 10 other children. All of us in some way, shape, or form over our lives have struggled, cycled in and out of poverty, dealt with addiction, dealt with issues of trauma, mental health, and other such things, and including the criminal justice system. And three of my brothers in particular have cycled in and out of the system now for 20 some years, if not longer. And when I went back and I looked at their arrest records, is about 24 or so arrests over a 20-year span of time, ranging from petty crimes to drug-related criminal activity to some violent crime. I looked at the bail that was set. I added up all the different times that they had been arrested and the bail that was set by magistrates all across Allegheny County. And I was shocked at the total number in terms of bail set for just three men, my brothers, all of whom were poor. The total number was $550,000 in bail set over a 20-year span of time for three men, 24 or so arrests, $550,000, $500,000 of bail that was set for those three men, my brothers. And when I went and I looked through each and every one of the different arrests, some of the bail that was set was anywhere from $5,000, sometimes it was $25,000. A number of times it was $50,000, and then twice it was $100,000 for bail that was set by a magistrate. In some of those circumstances over the years, I look back, we as a family, myself and some other siblings, were able to scrape together the money to pay the bails in order to get my brothers out. But there were other times that we were simply not able to actually do it. And in those times that we weren't, they languished in the county jail for days, weeks, sometimes months on end. And what was very interesting about that is typically where they were not able to pay bail to get out, they were more likely to actually be convicted or to enter into some type of plea bargain with regards to a petty crime or some drug-related criminal activity. When I went through the list, the list of arrests and the bail, I found that in the 24 times that they had been arrested over this time period, only twice did a magistrate actually release them on ROR, which many of you are now learning, which is release on own recognizance. Only twice did a magistrate utilize his or her discretion to release my brothers after being arrested. Otherwise, every other time, bail was set or they were confined to prison if they weren't able to actually meet the bail. I can't tell you how many times we had to go down to downtown Pittsburgh on Penn Avenue, Liberty Avenue, wherever it may be, to deal with and negotiate with a bail bondsman to pay the fee to get them out of prison. And so this is the system. To put insult to injury, I recall 2-3 years ago now, one of my adoptive brothers who'd been struggling for years on end in the system and with addiction and drug abuse, he died of overdose, fentanyl overdose in Wood Street Commons, which is the shelter bed there at Wood Street. And it was only weeks later that I recall receiving mail, which was court fines, court costs. There, at some points, there was bail that was due as a result of my brother. He had just gotten out of Allegheny County jail he was there for 6 months and spent time in solitary confinement. But it was insult to injury because here is my brother who was poor, who cycled in and out of the system for years, passes away, and here the system is then requesting in the dues, the court cost, everything. It was insult to injury. And this is how the system is set up. And it's an unjust system. And so, as a result of this, we're heading towards the spring elections. And now more than ever, it's imperative that we scrutinize all the candidates for district magistrate. They have extraordinary power to set the bail low. They have extraordinary power to not set bail whatsoever. They can discard bail altogether and release those who have been arrested. They have a lot of discretionary power. And as a result of that, it's imperative that we elect those judges who are going to be sympathetic to the injustices of cash bail system, particularly its impact on Black and Brown communities. We also want to ensure that these judges are progressive in their mindset with regards to criminal justice system, knowing that they hold so much power. And for me to think that we could put some people on the bench who, when a brother of mine or a family member of mine was before, I would know that this was a judge who understood their circumstances as poor men who struggled with mental health issues and struggled with alcohol and drug abuse issues. So with that being said, I hope you all do your due diligence to ensure that we elect the appropriate and the best judges to be on the bench. So with that being said, I want to thank the 14th Ward Independent Democratic Club again for allowing me to speak and share my story. And I hope that we can move forward with changing our criminal justice system for the better. So thanks so much. Bye.
I don't know about you, but I never used to pay a whole lot of attention to judicial races. But then Trump came along, and over again, we've seen the courts rescue American democracy. So just to take one example of many, did you know that at least 86 judges at all levels of courts rejected over 60 lawsuits brought by Trump and his supporters in their efforts to overturn the will of the American people? Where would we be without those courts? But what I haven't always appreciated enough is that the courts were always that important and continue to be. So I think this is a good time to try to get to know our courts better. So in Pennsylvania, for example, there are 4 layers of courts. At the bottom, we have the minor courts, which include magisterial courts and municipal courts. And these are the courts that decide minor cases like landlord-tenant disputes. They determine which criminal cases should be passed along to higher courts, and they issue warrants for arrest, they set bail, things like that. Above those courts are the courts of common pleas, and these are our trial courts, which hear serious criminal and civil cases. Above that, we have the Commonwealth Court and the Superior Court, which are appeals courts. And finally, at the top, we have the State Supreme Court, which has ultimate authority on all matters brought before lower courts. So this is to the state what the Supreme Court is to the country. And courts matter from the bottom to the top. For example, at the bottom, minor courts often make the decisions that most profoundly affect people's lives. So to take just one example, magistrates set bail. Now, bail is applied to ensure that defendants who are considered safe to the public show up for hearings. But not all defendants can afford bail. So if you have the money and you pay, you can go home. But if you don't have the money, you go to jail. And if you're sent to jail, even if it's just for a few days or a few weeks, you can lose your job, you can lose housing, you can even lose custody of your children. And that is an extremely high price to pay when you haven't even been convicted yet of a crime. So we need magistrates who understand that cash bail disproportionately punishes the poor and to apply cash bail sparingly or not at all. Then at the top, we have the state Supreme Court. So if you voted by mail in the presidential election this last November, you have the democratically controlled state Supreme Court to thank for rejecting a Republican-initiated lawsuit that would have invalidated your vote, my vote, the vote of most of our families, friends, neighbors. The Supreme Court came through for us, and that's because it is controlled by Democrats. So because courts determine so many important issues from criminal justice to election integrity, we need to take judicial races seriously. So this May 18th, we have a primary. We need to come out in force to make sure we have good Democratic judicial candidates on the ballot, and then come back on November 2nd for the general election to vote those people into office where they can take these important seats on the bench at all levels of the courts. This just couldn't matter more. So I plan to vote, and I hope you do too. Thanks.
Well, I guess that's me then.
That should be you now. Yeah.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for attending the annual meeting. I had a discussion yesterday with all of the members of the panel. One thing they all agreed on was that they didn't want me going on and on about them. So I'll be brief, introduce each and let them say a few words about their general thoughts on the subject, seeking justice and building community, police and public safety. And I think we'll probably go on to talk a little bit about the courts also, because there's some expertise there also. So very briefly, start with Jam Hammond. Mr. Hammond is listed on our emails as the acting executive director of the City of Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations, but I believe has recently become the permanent executive director. He has a master's of social work and is involved in a broad swath of work as at the Commission on Human Relations related to civil rights and related to preventing discrimination based on race, sex, gender identity, religion, a wide variety of different areas. And so I'd ask Mr. Hammond, would you introduce yourself and give us a little sense of the work that you do? Ron, have we got Mr. Hammond?
He's here. He hasn't turned on his video. So if you can hear Jam, turn on your video and unmute, and then we'll put you in the spotlight.
Well, maybe we should talk to Dr. Elliott while we wait for a moment.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, Kathy Elliott is the executive director of Gwen's Girls, which was founded by her mother, the legendary police commander Gwendolyn Elliott, to serve girls and young women in Pittsburgh in a variety of ways. She's also a doctor of nursing practice and has recently joined the American Civil Liberties Union, Pennsylvania, I believe, board. And much of her focus as a result of being associated with Gwen's Girls has been in juvenile justice issues, which is a vitally, vitally important area related to police, public safety, and criminal justice. So Dr. Elliott, would you mind introducing yourself for a moment and giving a sense of the work that you do?
Dr. Elliott, you're able to unmute. There you go. Thanks. I'll try that again.
Okay, because yeah, I said put in the chat that it was saying that I couldn't unmute. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for just having me here. Excited to engage in this conversation. Have been listening to the information and the videos that were, presented prior to, and so 100% agree with a lot of what was said. But I also want to add, sometimes a lot of people forget about the juvenile justice system and just the impact of what impact the judges and magistrates have in that realm. And so I am here to kind of uplift some of the data and information, as well as solutions that we have been working on through the Black Girls Equity Alliance, which is a collaboration of not only the systems leaders, so juvenile probation, the officials from DHS, but even the schools, and most recently started to engage with the magistrates and some of the judges, just to look at how do we, look at what's happening amongst our young people and within the juvenile justice system when it comes to law enforcement. That whole conversation around removing police from schools is a definite goal that many of us have, but we understand that the supports are necessary. So just, what are the candidates that are up for, like, school board, for the different district magisterial offices, as well as the judges, and then other elected official offices. This is going to take all efforts from everyone to address, and from juvenile, but also the adult section. So I'm glad to be here and look forward to, engaging in this conversation with you all.
Thank you, Dr. Elliott. Our last panelist is Summer Lee, who's well known to the club. She's a state representative in her second term, also a lawyer, graduate of Howard University Law School. And among the places that she represents as state representative are portions of the 14th Ward. She serves on the Judiciary Committee in the legislature and has worked on policing and justice issues both before and after being in the state legislature. So Representative Lee, would you mind introducing yourself and saying a few words?
Certainly. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Good to see everybody. I had to change it to screen view so I can see all the people, because it's been almost a year now, but it's still so weird talking into a computer screen. But it's so good to be with you all today, especially talking about these critical issues that we've really, I believe, in Pittsburgh, we've had a moment and occasion to really start to address head on. A lot of folks have been really just participating in this movement in different arenas, right? As a legislator, I've been here in my capacity for 2 years. This is now the beginning of my second session. But before that, you know, I came into this really from an organizing background, from activism, and really trying to figure out where I fit in best to help with this movement, to really advance the cause of racial and social justice, and really focusing on decarceration and what does it look like to envision a society that's beyond prisons and beyond police brutality and over policing. And that's what I've been trying to focus on since I've been in office. It's what I focused on last session, and it's absolutely what I intend to focus on this session. So from my role as a member of the Judiciary Committee, as a second term legislator, I intend to come back the same as I did before, bringing with me, you know, all the folks who have been in this movement, especially after the summer, really amplifying the voices of folks who are formerly incarcerated. Just proud to introduce bills around ending police violence and police accountability. Cash bail, I heard Jerry Dickinson talking about. I've just introduced that bill also. So we're looking to really, really, really move the needle on some of these things. And these conversations are really important as it goes to organizing in moving kind of stubborn elective bodies. So happy to enjoy joining this conversation.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Have we managed to get Mr. Hammond?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. He's up on video and unmuted as soon as you hit the button, I guess. Perfect.
I think so. I think you should be able to hear me now. Sorry about that. Yeah, hello everybody. So glad to be here. I'll just say a little bit about what the commission is, because I know oftentimes people don't know what we do. The Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations is the City of Pittsburgh civil rights enforcement agency. So when people feel that they've been discriminated against in housing, employment, public accommodations, or the administration of city services, then they can file a complaint with our office. That administration of city services is a complaint type that we call civil rights. And if somebody were to feel that any city employee, but in this conversation, we're talking about policing. So police had violated their civil rights under city code. They filed that complaint with the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. The other way that we're involved in policing for the city of Pittsburgh has to do with policy. So we work pretty closely, when at all possible, with the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police and the law department to define what policies are possible and appropriate when dealing with diverse populations. I'll just leave it off there. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
All right, thank you. Well, let's start. We saw Professor Dickinson talking about cash bail, and Representative Lee mentioned it also. There's also a couple of other reforms around public safety and incarceration that are going to be probably although the petitioning hasn't completed yet, but are probably going to be on the ballot this spring. One is a solitary confinement ban, and the other is a ban on no-knock warrants. Maybe we could start with Representative Lee, and could you talk a little bit about how, to your knowledge, each of these reforms would work and what the path is to getting to them?
Certainly. So these are critical. If you haven't heard about them yet, please let us know, because this is going to be an effort that's going to take literally every one of us. If everybody knows, you know, I think that there are some people here who have been politically engaged for so long, and they absolutely understand the inner workings of these systems. Some of us are a little bit newer to politics, but what we all have seen and all have experienced is that oftentimes government moves slow, and particularly as we're looking at state level and federal level, but really state level for us, right? There's often times where the legislature can come in and do something, but because we are in a gridlock, because we are, you know, we have a really non-productive body sometimes, where there's a lot of barriers and impediments, we're not able to advance pieces of legislation that people really, really want, that enjoy popular support. So here in Allegheny County, we are advancing 2 different ballot initiatives. And right now we're in the petition period for them. And the first one is going to be a county-wide ballot initiative. It's for solitary confinement. And what that would essentially do is end solitary confinement at the ACJ. I know a lot of folks think about incarcerated folks and incarcerated populations, and oftentimes we are absolutely inundated with, I would say, propaganda and kind of conditioned to believe that the harsh conditions that people face in prisons are humane, that they're okay. But the one thing that we all learn about in civics in school is that, you know, the 8th Amendment bans cruel and unusual punishment, and solitary confinement is cruel and unusual. The cells that they keep people in are too small to function in. The solitude, the isolation, it doesn't serve to help folks with mental health issues. It doesn't treat folks. It doesn't rehabilitate. What it does is it tortures. So ending solitary confinement is one of the first things that we need to do if we're really going to look at a just criminal justice system. So here in Allegheny County, if you live in the county, you can sign that petition to get it on the ballot. The second is banning a no-knock warrant, and that would be in the city of Pittsburgh. So Breonna Taylor is somebody who a lot of us know now, should know. A lot of the movement around this summer was centered around her. She's somebody who was a victim of a no-knock warrant during a police raid. And in the city of Pittsburgh, again, we could go through city council, and I've heard that there might be some interest in it. But I think that these grassroots level ballot initiatives really help to galvanize folks. It really helps to turn out voters. So if we can get these things on a ballot, which I believe we need something around 27,000 signatures, but we're moving along with that, right? So if we get those things on the ballot, that means that they'll be on the ballot this May. And that means that if you're in a city, you get to vote on both of those. If you're in a county, you get to vote on a solitary confinement ban. So it's major that we get these things to ballot so that we can hear from people, organizers and activists. So that's what those do. I'm happy to talk more about them, but the reason why they're going to ballot, while we're doing the ballot initiative instead of waiting for government, is because government is moving too slow. And people have been taken to the streets, have been marching, have been rallying, and especially the no-knock warrant. We know that if we don't do something about policing, then we are going to continue to see the same things over and over and over again. So this is really the people taking this into their own hands.
Dr. Elliott, I think most of your experience, you said, is in juvenile justice. And do you have any thoughts on how these kinds of reforms would affect children and families?
So we can't unmute ourselves.
Oh, sorry, I have to do it each time.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Elliott.
Looks like
So I have a habit of, like many of us that have been Zooming for the past year, have a habit of turning off our mute so that when other people are talking, there's no background noise feedback. So I won't cut it off anymore because it seems like you got to cut us back on.
Yeah,
so
it's just you four. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I would, look at it not just from a juvenile justice standpoint, but even just Gwen's Girls in general and the work that we do around social justice. This is definitely a initiative, and just the work that Summer Lee and all the other community organizations that are leading this effort to get this on the ballot. We are definitely behind it, because we know that a lot of these policies and practices are mostly, used against people of color and end up impacting them the most in the most negative way. And so, again, Breonna Taylor's story, just that whole incident in and of itself is just unacceptable and should not happen again. But unfortunately, we know in the way that our laws and the way that our policing is still occurring across the country, this has the potential to happen again unless we, as citizens, step up and say no more and put on the books and legislation to say that we do not, support these practices and they must change.
Hey, Matt, could I add really quickly, because I'd be remiss if I didn't, that these ballot initiatives, both of them are the brainchild of the Alliance for Police Accountability.
Yeah.
They have brought together a coalition of movement organizations and movement leaders to do this, but the leadership is coming right from Alliance for Police Accountability. Brandy Fisher, as a lot of us know and have worked with, and they've been doing an incredible job of organizing around this. So I wanted to make sure that I let folks know that that's where this work is coming from.
As the commission, we don't, recommend any particular policies, and also ACJ is outside of our jurisdiction, but I will add something small here, which is when we look at discrimination in the commission and on federal levels as well, we look at it from two different types of analysis, from disparate impact and disparate treatment analysis. Disparate treatment being people of a protected class being treated differently, disparate impact meaning a policy that in the end will cause a different impact on people's specific protected classes. So something that Representative Lee brought up is that solitary confinement bill. And one thing that we know, and that the commission itself, the city commission, can't touch, is ACJ's solitary confinement policy. But we do know that there's a disparate impact of the policy and of the use of solitary confinement on people of color, and specifically of people who are trans or non-binary. People who are trans and non-binary put in solitary confinement to just keep them safe from the population, of the general population of the prison. So by using this technique, having this available, it's in fact punishing people who are trans and non-binary for being themselves inside of prison. So eliminating the use of solitary confinement could in fact address this disparate impact issue, where you have a policy, you're treating everyone the same, everyone could be put in solitary confinement, but it is disparately impacting people of color, people who are trans and non-binary. And if you're a person who believes that discrimination and disparate impacts are bad, then I would say make that known to your legislators, make that known at the polls. These are policies that could affect those types of outcomes.
Since you mentioned that, at the commission, have you seen other disparate impacts on trans and non-binary people in other areas, not just in the jail, but in other areas of public safety?
He muted himself back up.
Oh, all right. Try it again.
I'm so used to muting myself.
Hands off that button.
Yes, I will say that there are disparate impacts and disparate treatment, and there are a couple of things going on when you're talking about trans and non-binary populations with law enforcement. There's a disparate treatment element that people often see, where they are more likely to be perceived as a sex worker if they're trans and non-binary, and therefore more likely to be approached by police, more likely to be arrested. There is disparate impacts of policies where, because trans people know that they will be treated differently in the prison and jail population, they are less likely to feel comfortable going forward when they need law enforcement. So people who are trans and non-binary won't trust to call 911 the same that somebody else would, because they're concerned that they will be put in a general population cell where they're then at risk. So they choose not to call 911 even if they need to. So we see both types of analysis that can go on with trans and non-binary people.
A lot of that sounds like it comes out of a sort of the preconceptions and culture of police. Dr. Elliott, you come from a police family. Do you have any thoughts on what works and doesn't work in police culture?
No, that's a funny question too for me, but no, I don't. All I know is how my mother was. And so many people that are on this line, I see some familiar faces and know the work, those that have worked with my mom. She was about the community. She understood the importance of law enforcement, but also understood the balance of being humane and treating people with equity, as well as, just letting them know you've made this mistake, or, by law, I do have to arrest you. But however, these are some supports, or even just her, retiring from the police force and starting an organization to address issues within a population, girls and specifically Black girls, who are often the most arrested or referred to a system when compared to, white girls who do some of the same types of behaviors, because I don't want to call them crimes, because a lot of times the things that our young people are being referred to the court system for are not crimes. They're, typical behaviors that quite honestly, me and you participated in when we were younger, but we just didn't get caught, or we were treated in a different way. Our parents may have been called and it'd be something totally different. But for many of our Black youth, the answer is oftentimes, and sometimes it's even people thinking that they're getting them help, but the criminal justice system and even the child welfare system is not built to help kids to, address some of the issues and needs that they have. And the administrators of these systems will tell you that flat out. And so I feel like the challenge of law enforcement today is, how do we, again, balance the need for public safety and really focus on those, crimes that are happening that, are against public safety, and with those crimes that, are because of, a lack of having some type of resource. So, somebody goes out and commits a crime, theft or something like that, but they haven't eaten in 3 days. Like, where is the responsibility of society in that? And to me, that's not a true policing issue. And so there's an opportunity for us to look at policing in a totally different way, community policing, but even policing in schools, because again, our kids do not need to continue to be over policed. They need the supports and things. And one of the things that we're working on now, I am so afraid post-COVID, when our kids who have been traumatized for a whole year from a lot of, what we see is there's a lot of death that has happened, a lot of fractions within families, a lot of mental health treatment needed, and those things not getting addressed. And then they come back into a school building and they may, act out or have a behavior, and then they end up, in handcuffs or something. And so I'm working very hard with the collaboration that we have within the Black Girls Equity Alliance to really be ready for when that happens, so that if a behavior happens in the school or in the community, that people, the first thought is, oh, we have to call the police. No, what are some of the other options that we have that we can support our young people and their family to keep them safe in the community?
I think to just bounce off of some of the things that Dr. Elliott said, and from your question, Mac, I think you can count some of what we see in disparate treatment and disparate impact in police culture. I think that's completely valid to do so. And the police department, particularly I can speak to the City of Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, will acknowledge, toxicity in its culture. But what we're looking at is also something that is perpetuated over time. And so, the City of Pittsburgh has a lot of great initiatives for its police with Welcoming Pittsburgh. It's developing a cross-cultural training initiative, but some things will take time to change because they've taken so much time to create. Particularly if we look at what we could call, cross-generational trauma, or ethnic trauma, racial trauma. People who know from their family, from their community, that they can't trust the police, and it's been that way for so many years. So there are definitely things that the police department can change. It's working to change it. There are more, but it will take time to undo it. because there have been years and years of that distrust, so that there's a trauma response every time the police become involved, even if nothing's happened. And that sets the tone for the rest of the interaction. So it will just take a long time to undo all of that that's been done.
Which something we saw this summer, right in the 14th Ward, was a confrontation between a moonlighting police officer who was wearing a Blue Lives Matter mask with someone who was attending the Squirrel Hill Farmers Market. And then we saw those flags on January 6th appearing outside the Capitol when the Capitol was attacked. And I believe, Representative Lee, you tweeted or posted something on Facebook about Capitol Police in Harrisburg wearing those masks.
I did.
Could you talk a little bit about what that tells us about police culture, in your opinion, and what you think that means in terms of public safety?
Certainly, and I will, because it's funny, like when you were saying that, I was just thinking about the interaction that I had with a former candidate who was upset about me like tweeting about the Capitol Police wearing a Blue Lives Matter flag, and what his contention was is that you don't get to determine what's racist. You know, some people can say, not even misinterpret, he said some people can say that Black Lives Matter is offensive, right? And you don't get to decide what's offensive. And I'm like, it's not the same thing. When we're talking about a culture of policing, or we're talking about the history of policing, and specifically the history and the resurgence of this particular symbol, it's inextricably linked to the reaction to Black Lives Matter, to the reaction of Black and brown and other marginalized people coming together and saying, please don't kill us. Coming together and saying, please, we need to make a change in our society. We need justice, you know, we need accountability, and we need liberation, right? So when we see a symbol that comes up in direct response to this particular movement, this particular ask, it becomes impossible to separate the two, to separate what this symbol is now interpreted as meaning now, and even what some of them may say that it perhaps meant to them before this movement. And that happens with symbols a long time, right? The Blue Lives Matter symbol, what they call the thin blue line or whatever, this is not the only symbol that has undergone this sort of transformation, or at least a sort of kind of change in its meaning and what it resembles and what it means to folks who are reacting to it, right? You can say the same thing about the Nazi flag, which was not always used by the Nazi party. It was a flag, you know, it was a symbol that came from other cultures in history that had no sort of connotation to what the Nazis used it as, but they took that symbol and they corrupted it, and now it means something else. It means something to the people who are under it, who are oppressed underneath it, right? The same with the Confederate flag. So when we're talking about police officers and policing, we're talking about a group of folks who are hired and under the employ of the state, who are hired explicitly to protect and serve all people, right? So if we, so say me or any other folks at the Capitol building, right? If we are supposed to feel safe in these environments, but then also we are met with a police officer who's wearing a symbol that explicitly says, I don't believe your Black Lives Matter, we have to start to make the psychological connections that Black and brown folks will have to that symbol, right? It sends a message to us, and that message to us is that your movement has no value to me. That's your cries, that's your fight, that's your organizing, that's your activism. None of that means anything to me. And that we hold it in such low regard that even though we know this symbol causes you hurt, that it causes you a trauma reaction, right? That we're gonna wear it anyways. And that's why that symbol is so hateful. That's why it comes off as so hateful to people who are historically oppressed, people who are historically marginalized, especially about policing, right? So that's why I had time that day to go and talk to that gentleman. I had to have time that day, right? Because what we don't see is anybody else, any other group, and their hate symbols be told to tolerate them or been made excuses for them, right? We only see that with Black folks. And that's something that this movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, inherently is seeking to address. That's what we're seeking to address as we're talking about the need and a shift in police culture in general, right? Because the fact that we even have this culture, the fact that it's being perpetuated and it's being protected at every step, as Jam said, you know, these systems are not created overnight. They're not going to be dismantled overnight, but we can't even begin to dismantle them until the people who kind of have their feet on the lever, you know, are willing to let up a little bit. That's what I have on that.
Great.
No, but I will say, but before I go, I actually, since that argument, I saw a police chief in another city actually not denounce the Blue Lives Matter symbol, but actually articulated the ways in which it's been corrupted and the reason why she wouldn't allow her department to use that symbol anymore, because she knows that it far out the benefits or whatever history that police officers attach to it, the benefits are far outweighed by the trauma that it causes the community that they're trying to serve.
So the interaction of people with the criminal justice system isn't just in the jails and with the police. An important part of it is also at the bench, the magistrates and the common pleas judges especially, all of whom are elected. We saw a criminal judge in Allegheny County recently, eventually, off the bench because of some racist statements he made in chambers. But that, in order for that to happen, it required a large degree of courage from the lawyers who were in that room to come out and talk about it. So I'd like to ask all of the panelists to sort of talk about bench culture. I know, appeals from the Human Relations Commission go to the bench. There's a juvenile court that handles juvenile issues. Could we start with Dr. Elliott? What do we need to know about bench culture, and what can we do to improve it through elections?
One of the things that that we see and that we're trying to address and get a handle on, it kind of boils down to this element of discretion. So all judges have this discretion to, impose, sentencing, whether it's community service or whatever it is within the juvenile justice system, but even in the adult criminal justice system. The same piece goes to the fees and fines. For us, it's like how, we understand that judges think and, have their own methods of kind of running their court. But when we mix in all these elements of implicit bias and potential, as we already know, the disproportionate, incarceration or high fees and fines, or as was in the video talking about the cash bail, the amounts that are being adjusted. We need to make sure that the judges that we have, coming in and the ones that we have on the bench now, continue to receive the training as well as the oversight on what the decisions that they're making, how they align with, I guess, for lack of a better word, fairness, but then also just the impact on it, what it has on the defendant or juvenile or family, the community, because oftentimes people are, these decisions are being made, and the true impact, especially when people think that they're helping, a family or helping a mother to, get control of their child by imposing these, different sentences, when all it does is contribute to harm. And so they need to be educated, as well as, in touch with what is available in the community. Because again, we need to, what would our society look like if we were able to kind of shift this onus and this power that our law enforcement, as well as our judicial system, has over our families and our citizens, and put it back into the hands of the community to be able to, provide the support. Because a lot of times these sentences and, what is given really does not restore or, kind of teach them from doing wrong, especially when we don't get down to the root of what it is that has contributed to the behavior or the crime that they have committed. And so I think that, it's important and very imperative that we continue to, and I've seen, in this last election where people have really started to listen and to get engaged and to, understand, have a better understanding about what their vote means, and then holding the people accountable that we put in office to do what they're elected to do. It's not just their decision. They're there to kind of work for the people. They're for the people. And so until we start to really, really get into that type of mindset, we're going to continue to see some of the sentences and the things that, that are just unfairly imposed on our people.
If I can add on just briefly, I think Dr. Elliott hit the nail on the head when it comes to education and training for judges. I think that we should all be looking at, judges either before they run or while they're in office. And both judges and lawyers have continuing education requirements, by the way. So making sure that when they are meeting those, that they are meeting them with curriculum. There's a vast array of curriculum that they can be taking, but there is curriculum out there to address issues of social justice and racial justice. Are the judges taking that? And do you want that to be a requirement for your judge that's getting your vote? That's a question you can ask yourself. But making sure that judges are receiving that education. I think diversity is a wonderful thing, but ignorance is not. So there's a difference between a diversity of opinion and just plain ignorance of facts and ignorance of what's going on. So if we can get judges all on the same page in the knowledge that they can have differing opinions, but we need them all to have the same education to get to the same place. So they're making their decisions in a way that's informed. That's all that I would say. I think Dr. Elliott already said basically that.
And if I could add on, when I think about judicial races, they are incredibly important. And as Marie Norman mentioned kind of in her opening video, it is something that we overlook oftentimes, but it's because it's a very complicated system, and it's not complicated unintentionally. Just like our political system as a whole, it's not complicated unintentionally. It is built so that a certain class of folks feel included in it, and that others feel excluded from it. And the judicial system is no different. But when we think about Allegheny County, when we think about Pennsylvania right now, we have so many judicial seats that are up. And the judge that was mentioned earlier in this question is not an anomaly, and he's not unique. If you just look out throughout the history, even especially in Pennsylvania, you will find instances of judges who were selling kids to the juvenile justice system. Judges who are in some way corrupt. You can see prosecutors who behave the same way. It is a systemic thing. The one power that we do have in Pennsylvania, which is you can argue it's a pro and a con, is that we elect judges. We yet elect them. Some states don't actually elect their judges. Others are appointed, but here in Pennsylvania, we do still elect them. And that means that we have opportunities when we're tuned in and when we're plugged in to really dig in to the folks who are seeking our support for judge. We really have the opportunity to vet and really to find folks who are justice minded, who are socially justice inclined to get on the bench, right? Because there's a reason why it's out of vogue. It's probably illegal to have an all-white jury if you're a Black person, right? The same can be said of a judge. The same biases, the same implicit biases and explicit biases that a jury is subject to, so too are judges. And when we think about the power that judges have, when we think about just from municipal court to implementing cash bail or not, to deciding if before you are adjudicated guilty or found guilty, that we can keep you in jail for cash bail, a poor person, and you can lose your job, and you can lose your kids, and you can lose your home. Thinking about the effects and who that impacts, more right? That's power. That is incredible power invested in one person. When we think about going up the system, whether or not, somebody's freedom is on the line, it's so critically important that the people who are serving as our judges are people who are not infected with these sorts of cultural biases, whether it be racial, whether it be gender, whether it be about your sexuality, things of that nature, disability. All of these folks who are marginalized in some way oftentimes are forced to come in front of a judge who dehumanizes them, who over-criminalizes them, who have been conditioned by society to find them more culpable. So that's why it's so important that we pay attention in these races right now, which is going to be really hard. I get that. Judges can't ask you for money explicitly, right? So their campaigning looks different than my campaigning would. Where you'll see me out your door, you may not see a judicial candidate, asking you explicitly for support. But we do have to find a way as a community. 14th Ward is a perfect place, a perfect community that models this as a community of getting out information. So when you learn something about a judge, please share it. Share it on your social media, share it with your friends and your families. When you meet a candidate and you hear what they're about, or if you know something about a former judge who is seeking re-election or retention, please share that information. It's the only way that we can get these out, because it is very hard to remove a judge who has gone bad or who started bad, right? Because there's so much deference given to them. So it's hard to get rid of them. It's easier for us to ensure that we're putting good ones in.
I love talking about the judiciary, so I'm going to insert one, non-moderator item here. We have a seat on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court up this year. In Pennsylvania, in most states, the rules for what kind of education judges have to go through, for what it takes to be a licensed attorney, all of those things are set by people like Representative Lee, the legislators. Pennsylvania is not like that. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court sets all of those things. So you're not only choosing someone to decide cases, you're choosing someone to set policy for the whole judiciary when you choose the Supreme Court justice. So worth thinking about when you go make your decision on that. A question in the comment has reminded me that we've talked about judges, we've talked about police, we've talked about jails, we haven't talked about prosecutors. And so I'll throw out there, what's the role of the district attorney, the ADAs who work for them, the attorney general of the state, the whole sort of system of prosecutors in the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania?
I mean, I'll start. The DA's office, prosecutors, DA, these are gatekeepers. Similar to judges, they're your first line of, they're a person, especially someone who's accused, it's their first line, their first gate that they have to go through in determining whether or not they're going to be free or not. So when we think about the need for anti-racist prosecutors and DAs, it cannot be overstated. Across the country, there is a serious kind of stereotype and I would say a stigma with the Black community on prosecutors. The Black community, especially poor Black folks, Black and brown folks who are more inclined to be disproportionately criminalized. There is a stigma with prosecutors and DAs because those are the people who they've seen apply really unscrupulous practices, have bulldozered over their lives. And their biases have gone unfettered. They're unmitigated biases. And we've seen the impacts of it. We've seen an entire generations of people in our communities who we've lost because of an unjust system that's headed by prosecutors and DAs. So we're talking about the need to really address that, right? Part of beating back that stigma is also realizing that there is a potential, just as there's a potential for a corrupt prosecutor and a corrupt state rep, a corrupt politician, these jobs that we always kind of think goes hand in hand with evil or bad, there's also a serious need for good and just prosecutors, good and just Black and brown and other marginalized prosecutors, because while prosecutors are the ones who have to say, we're going to charge you, they can also be the ones to say that we won't charge you. They can be the one to look at the extenuating circumstances in a marginalized person's life and say that, because of the fact that you were poor and you stole that food, you went to the grocery store and you stole, because of your poverty, because of you lost your job, because the pandemic has hit your family so hard, we're not going to charge you, or we're not going to move forward with charges of that severity. Those are all possibilities that we have with prosecutors and DAs. So that's why it's so important that as folks are coming up and getting into the system, that's why we need culturally representative bench just as much as we need culturally representative counsel, culturally representative DAs and prosecutors. There is a possibility of having social justice minded DAs, right? We saw it in Philadelphia. We're seeing a movement across the country to get more social justice minded DAs in office, but again, elected position, which means that we have to have the courage as constituents to support folks who are vocal, who are courageous, to back them with our money and with our time and with our organizing efforts. Because if we're not, these are communities that can be destroyed by 1, 2, 3 people.
Yeah, I applaud, love that response. Nothing more to add. It's the same within the juvenile justice system, ditto. They are the gatekeepers and can definitely, kind of set the standard and the policies that need to be followed and that the police, should adhere to.
And yeah, actually, we know that 99% of police officers who are accused of a misconduct go unindicted. 99% of police officers who are accused of a misconduct are never indicted in the first place. The entire Black Lives Matter movement is because we never see any sort of justice, because there is no recourse for a Black man, woman, or child, or trans person who was killed, or disabled person who was shot by police officers in what was a terrible misunderstanding. There is no recourse for them. So part of that is also looking into special prosecutors, as part of looking at that system, the relationships that DAs have with police departments, and that incestuous kind of relationship that they have, that they uphold, that they need each other in their capacity. And we have to ask ourselves, are they the best suited to charge all folks, right? So that's a part of that too.
We're running kind of low on time here. There's one question here from the chat that I want to make sure to give everybody a chance to address. We've got about 4 months before we have an election, a little bit less than 4 months. And so somebody asks here, how can voters be best prepared to elect the best official to deliver justice to the people? What can we do as individuals over the next 3.5 months to make sure we walk into that voting booth armed with the best information to fill out that ballot?
I think Jam said it, I believe. We just have to continue to educate ourselves about the candidates and be very clear on what we expect for them to do, and to understand that we have a voice, as individuals, but then as a collective. And so if you're not comfortable, and I'm speaking to the choir because you all are a part of a group, but, I would tell somebody who isn't that, if you need to align with, an organization or a group that is, kind of advocating for the things that that you align with, and get active. That's, a lot of our, people, for a variety of different reasons, have been disenfranchised with the voting process and are not, kind of in tune to what's happening. But I think that there's a shift now. People understand the importance and that their voice does matter and their vote matters. I mean, if it wasn't for Pennsylvania, Allegheny County, and probably a lot of the work of many of you all on this call, we wouldn't be all, kind of at ease, a little bit more at ease, with what happened just a few weeks ago. So, yeah, educate yourself on the different candidates. And I believe Summer has said, what were some of these people that are running for whatever position, what were they doing before they ran? Like, don't now, jump on a bandwagon and say what you want to do around social justice. Were you doing that work prior to?
The only thing that, okay.
Go ahead, I'm done.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what I would say. And the only thing that I would add on to that is, your education can come from a lot of different places, and I would almost make sure that it does. Make sure that you're getting a diverse group of opinions. Make sure that you hear from somebody who maybe you haven't heard before, or somebody who comes from a different walk of life than you do, when you're considering your candidates and the stances that you want to take with your vote. It's important enough that you want to get advice, not just from people who look like you or walk like you.
I would say I'm gonna offer something that I'm gonna regret, but it is true. As we're talking about like how do we start to make these really critical decisions on off years, particularly, you get inundated with information during a presidential election and even during a congressional one. But this one, where we're into municipal and judicial races, it gets a little bit more tricky. I would say that I would imagine that everybody here has felt a shift in Allegheny County, right? That we're seeing folks who are becoming more politically discerning. And that's part of organizing. Organizing and engaging and expanding the electorate helps to make all of us more politically discerning. When we see that politics can be done differently, and we start to build relationships with folks who we're putting into politics, you know, we inherently learn more through just doing, right? I do have a question. How many people on here have an elected official who they in some way trust, right? Trust, or at least have a relationship with, that you feel like you can go to? If anybody does, can you like raise your hand? Those elected officials right now are being inundated with judge calls, y'all. The judge candidates are calling us. They are calling us every single day. Y'all, I don't answer 10-digit numbers anymore, because it's always a judge candidate and they want to talk to me, and I need time to sit with, you know, my own questions about what I want to ask or what I need to know about this particular position. But they call, right? And they may not have time to call all of you, but they are calling your elected officials, and they are calling your community leaders and your community organizers, which means that when you're looking for people who you can go to, if you can't get in touch with a particular candidate, especially a judicial candidate, reach out to that politician, that elected official, that public servant who you trust and whose opinion, you know, they've proven to be trustworthy in that instance. You know, those people, especially those elected officials who bring a different perspective and a different analysis, like Jam said, to all of this, the ones who maybe come from the community that you're not used to being in, you know, the ones who have navigated society differently, there are us, we exist. And, you know, I'll post when I know what I know, if I find out what I need to know. But there are others, you know, and if you trust somebody like that, just know that they have access to information that you deserve access to. And oftentimes, as a state representative, my job is to be your access point, because I recognize that no candidate can call all 60,000 of my constituents, but they will call me. So when I know things and when my colleagues know things, we try to get it out to you, because that can also help. So I would like to put that up for consideration, that if you have one of those that you trust, hit them up and ask them, you know, what have they heard from the judicial candidates, or what have they heard from the municipal candidates?
Well, Representative Lee's just created an enormous amount of work for herself.
I know. Oh God. I told you I regretted it as soon as the thought came to my mind. But it is true.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for being here. Ordinarily, there'd be a round of applause from everybody attending, but most everybody is muted, so I'm afraid I'll just have to be me and Ron. And I think that's a good place for us to move on to the next item, which is about our club endorsement meeting, which is one of those places where you're going to be able to learn something about the various candidates who are running this year. And so I'm going to now mute myself and pass that on.
Okay, Liz Healy, give me a second to unmute you. I think you might need that, but you'll be, thanks for being able to tell everybody about the endorsement election coming up. You should be ready.
There we go. Thanks, Ron. I think the last question to the panel was the perfect segue. How do you know who you should be voting for? And that's, the club was founded back in 1964, I believe it was, for that very purpose, to help inform voters give voters a process to be able to hear from candidates, be able to make informed decisions. And so this year, the club's annual meeting, the Barbara Daly Danko Forum, was devoted to justices on the ballot for that very purpose. We want every club member to participate in the endorsement process. The endorsement meeting is going to be March 21st. And this will be the second year that we'll be gathering virtually to do it. And it's surprising, it was quite successful last year. We had 130 people participate in the meeting. Every candidate who participated, all candidates are invited, all Democratic candidates are invited. And I believe just about every single candidate, we didn't have Torricella, we didn't have a couple people, but we had almost every candidate represented. And it gave people an opportunity to hear them speak. And we also did a similar kind of in the chat opportunity for people to ask questions. And we had a number of questions for each candidate. And we have many, many candidates on the ballot this year. So I anticipate this may be a longer meeting. We shall see whether the judicial candidates, especially for Common Pleas Court, whether that winnows down a little bit before our endorsement meeting. But as Maurice Norman spoke about, we'll be endorsing for Supreme Court, Commonwealth Court, Superior Court, Court of Common Pleas. And at this point, I think I've heard that there are 35 candidates running. I have a list that has about 31 or 32. We also have the county sheriff will be on the ballot, the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, city council district 8, and school board districts 1 and 5. And for every single one of those races, every one of those candidates has an opportunity to make our community more just and more equitable. And so we want to make sure that all club members participate in this process. Let me just get into the weeds a little bit. Everybody who has already paid their 2021 dues will also be voting today in the election for the board and for some changes in the bylaws and constitution of the club. If you haven't yet paid your 2021 dues, we would urge you to do that ASAP. For people who are lapsed members, and that means members who did not pay dues in 2019 or 2020, you're really coming in as a new member. And assuming that the bylaws changes will pass, people will need to pay their dues by February 4th. Any lapsed members or new members by February 4th in order to be eligible to vote in the endorsement. And the wonderful thing at the endorsement process, everybody gets a vote. Everybody who's a member gets an opportunity to vote. And the high vote getters, people have to get, no, Julie can give me the exact number, but I believe they have to get at least 40% of the vote in order to get an endorsement. If there's a huge field for one single position and we can't get to any endorsement, then we don't endorse in that race. But as Ron said at the beginning of the meeting, we had a researcher from CMU who did a little work a few years ago, and she determined that candidates who have the club endorsement get a 4 to 5% benefit in terms of votes in the primary. So the club endorsement makes a difference. Once the endorsement vote is held, and that'll be held on the 21st, where you can hear and have an opportunity to question candidates. Then once that vote is taken, we prepare the voter's guide. And this year we had to do things, our time frame has gotten sped up a little bit because we want to make sure that people, when they begin to vote by mail, are going to already have received the voter's guide. So we are timing the distribution of the voter's guide with the beginning of the mail ballots being sent out, since we anticipate there'll still be a very large number of people voting by mail. We'll have a remote voting process. Everyone who is a member in good standing and has paid their dues will get a link to a voting app called OpaVote, and people will be able to vote in the endorsements at that meeting. So we really hope, and some people prefer you can pay your dues online by going to the club website, or you can write a check and send it to Noel Walkington, the club treasurer. And I know some people prefer to do it by check. But I urge people to think about paying your dues soon to make sure you're going to be eligible to participate in that endorsement process. I also, for people who've already paid their 2021 dues today, members, you, if you go and look in your email, you're going to see that you have 2 emails now from OpaVote, which is the link that we're using. We urge you to open those links. It's a unique link based on your email, so no one else can use it. It can only be used once. We ask you to please vote for the members of the board, and also vote on the changes to the bylaws and constitution. And we've been working really hard at this, and we just realized just as soon as the voting went live, oh my goodness, we had left one office off the ballot. So that's why you have a second email from OpaVote to vote for the 3rd vice president. So we hope you will open both of those and vote. We really appreciate everybody's participation. And we hope that this meeting today has really given you the information you need to make informed decisions as you hear candidates speak at the endorsement meeting. So thanks, everybody. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Liz. Let's see, where am I? Anyway, again, thanks to the panel and Representative Lee, Dr. Elliott, and Mr. Hammond for that panel. And Mac, thank you so much for anyway, thank you so much for moderating. I would like to recognize a few more elected officials and candidates who are here. They are, I'm trying to put my picture up, but I'm not Liz, but it's great to have you right there. Amanda Green Hawkins is here, and she's a candidate for Commonwealth Court. Carolyn Nichols is here, and she's a candidate for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Matt Rogers is here. He's a candidate for the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas. Chuck Porter is also a candidate for Common Pleas. Judge David Spurgeon, sitting on the bench of Common Pleas, is here. Judge Maria McLaughlin, Pennsylvania Superior Court Judge, is here. And I'd like to also give a shout out for his attendance here. Kevin Kraus, candidate for Sheriff of Allegheny County, is here as well. Again, thanks so much to everybody who's here. Thanks so much for everything you do. And with that, we will adjourn. I would like to just show you some of the dates coming up. Thank you so much for the family of Barbara Danko for supporting her and helping her to become the leader that she was in the 14th Ward. And thank you to everyone who helps lead the club and the committees who are most progressive in our area. It's the 7th Ward and the 14th Ward, Jean Clark and Sam Hans-Greco, respectively. Updates and recordings from this meeting will be on our website at pgh14widc.org. You can see that. So thank you very much. We'll be up for a little while in case anybody has questions to chat, and we can take care of that. Thanks so much, and have a great afternoon.